invoking everything I can to help me do a good job. Got these on so you can't see the fear in my eyes. All right. It's showtime. Be not afraid. You're listening to WRFG Atlanta. Oh dear, I'm not sure if this is working or not. Oh, all right, just restarting. Be not afraid. You're listening to WRFG Atlanta.
WRFG operates on the frequency of 89.3 megahertz as authorized by the Federal Communications Commission. Opinions expressed on WRFG do not necessarily represent the opinions of Radio Free Georgia Broadcasting, Inc., its staff, or volunteers. This program contains language and/or information which may be strong for some listeners. Portions of this program are pre-recorded. Discretion is advised.
All right, let's use the heck out of this disclaimer, shall we? Welcome. You are listening to Solution Space. My name is Adam Wadley. I have been advised that I haven't been having the volume of my voice loud enough on these broadcasts, so welcome to maximum exposure. Anyway, welcome. I hope you are having a wonderful day. This chosen day, this leap day, February 29th. I thought I was lucky. I didn't even think of this last week. I thought I was lucky. I was broadcasting on February 22nd, which is my half birthday. My birthday is August 22nd. But this is possibly an even more auspicious event. Not only is it a leap day, and I'm going to make all the most of that. I'm going to talk to you about the leap of faith as described by one Soren Kierkegaard. I'm going to talk about that. You know how I love it. Any excuse to talk about some philosophy. But not only that, do you realize this is the last day of Black History Month? This is a supplement. This is extra bonus. You know, buy one, get one free, extra day of Black history. So one more day of Black history. It is Leap Day. It is Leap of Faith Day, just as it is Leap of Faith Year. And so I'm so delighted that you are joining us today. Just to let you know right here at the jump, this is a call-in show. At any point, feel free to call in and interrupt my, let's call them musings, shall we? Feel free to call in and hop into, the record. Feel free to go down in history with me. We will enter the Utah Data Center together. All right. So if you'd like to do that, feel free to call in. The telephone number here is 404-523-8989. Again, that's 404-523-8989. So, on this week's program, there are a lot of things that I want to get to. I don't even have the whole list in front of me, but we will be talking more about Afro-pessimism, philosophical tendency, which talks about how anti-blackness and the conflation of blackness with nothingness and slaveness and things of this nature, how that is at the heart of what we call civilization, because we haven't even gotten to civilization yet. That's the spoiler alert. Anyways, so we'll be talking more about Afro-pessimism. There's some lovely overlap between Afro-pessimism and Jean Baudrillard. Shout out Dr. J. So I'll be reading from Baudrillard. I mentioned last week his treatment of the concept of what is non-Euclidean. I'm going to tie that in back explicitly with Ben Zweibelsen's theory of the Newtonian, or the post-Newtonian. So this is basically just like Enlightenment, modern, white, basically, ways of thinking about things. And hate to tell you, but Kansas is going bye-bye. So come with me, click your heels together, say there's no place like loving love, and together we will have an interesting hour. There will be more to talk about. Yesterday, the recording artist Grimes, better known to me as Minister B, from Minister Boucher, Claire Elise Boucher, joined together with Midjourney to do an image jam on Discord and spent basically 2 hours coming up with pictures of cherubs with machine guns and female gladiators and stuff. It was a vibe. It was a complete fairy Roman Empire vibe. So I plan on talking to you a little bit about that as well. And also this week we've had two important forms of protest. We had a protest vote against the sitting president of the so-called quote-unquote nation state, the United States of America. Ever heard of it? We had a protest vote by an Arab Muslim population in Michigan, protesting, of course, the ongoing military operations in Palestine, in Israel-Palestine, called a genocide, called a war, called lots of different things. We'll be talking about that. Also, the thoughts of Yuval Noah Harari, who is talking about the prospect of there being more war, and also the idea of there being a fight for the soul of the Israeli nation. So those are some other things that are coming your way. And of course, this week also, we had the self-immolation of Aaron Bushnell at, I believe, the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. So we're going to be connecting this with the theory of Jean Baudrillard on dying and death as political and symbolic phenomenon, and we're going to be connecting it with an essay by John Gillespie Jr., who's from the Afro-pessimist tradition, called On the Prospect of Weaponized Death, which also gets into some Baudrillard situations. So, with all that being said, strap in. Cease your projection of ontological terror onto any sort of scapegoats or groups. It's time to internalize that noise. It is time to become the ontological terror, but also it's a jubilation. I said it's a celebration. Hashtag Stephen Colbert at the Correspondence Dinner. Anyway, so with that being said, we're going to get straight into our invocation. I'm going to be reading you a poem that was discussed on the image jam between Midjourney, David S. Host, I think his name is, and Claire Elise Boucher. They were in discussion yesterday while they were sort of milking up people's creative ideas. They basically got people to make pictures for them, and apparently it's going to inspire Ms. Boucher's Coachella outfit. And maybe they'll get in touch with you about working together, but mainly they hope you had fun. Anyway, so might be able to talk about, the way in which this sort of crowdsourcing is, I don't know, it reflects a new kind of forced labor. And maybe we can talk about how that intersects with ideas of Afro-pessimism and slavery and so on and so forth. But we'll get to all that. I'm going to be reading you this poem just because it was brought up in that. It's called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace. But first, I'm going to do a little bit of singing to really, help set the sacred mood. This is going to be from this song called Monk Chant by the Monks. It's not on their album. They released one album in 1966, I want to say, called Black Monk Time. So that's especially interesting because it has black on there. I looked it up and apparently they associate black with nothingness. So that's also an interesting thing to tie in with Afro-pessimism. That being said, here's how the monk chant goes. Oh, 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 oh. I like to think, and the sooner the better, of a cybernetic meadow where mammals and computers live together in mutually programming harmony, like pure water touching clear sky. I like to think, right now please, of a cybernetic forest filled with pines and electronics where deer stroll peacefully past computers as if they were flowers with spinning blossoms. I like to think, it has to be, of a cybernetic ecology where we are free of our labors and joined back to nature, returned to our mammal brothers and sisters, siblings, and all watched over by machines of loving grace. So I hadn't read that poem myself. It has some language I wouldn't use, folks. Joined back to nature. Is nature something else? I'm sorry. That's a whole Enlightenment idea of a distinction between quote unquote humans and nature that we just don't abide. This is not a stream for, what am I trying to say? You know, hyper-real delusional enlightenment constructs. But all that being said, that's all right. So, busting into the substance of the program here, before I take my first break, I'm going to talk to you about The Leap of Faith by Soren Kierkegaard. So we're here on Leap Day, and the leap of faith is a pretty exciting idea from philosophy. Soren Kierkegaard, he's some sort of Scandinavian, maybe he's like Swedish or something. And he's what's called an existentialist. Kierkegaard was a Christian. And, I forgot to mention that you can follow along. I've put together a lot of links, and all the quotes that I'm going to read today are collected in a post to the experimental unit Substack that I've made called Leap Day Show Supplement. You can find a link to the Substack at wrfg.org/solution-space. So the window to get into all my stuff is to go to wrfg.org/solution-space. You can also go through the schedule and find the page for Solution Space. And there you'll find, again, a link to the Substack, and that you can follow along with the program basically that way, because there's a bunch of links and a lot of text that I'll be reading today. So I'm just going to read from Wikipedia about this idea of the leap of faith and a little bit about what it says in connection to Kierkegaard. So this is now quoting Wikipedia. A leap of faith, according to Kierkegaard, involves circularity, as the leap is made by faith. In his book, Concluding Unscientific Postscript, Kierkegaard describes the leap. Thinking can turn toward itself in order to think about itself, and skepticism can emerge. But this thinking about itself never accomplishes anything. Kierkegaard says thinking should serve by thinking something. Kierkegaard wants to stop thinking's self-reflection, and that is the movement that constitutes a leap. Kierkegaard was an Orthodox Scandinavian Lutheran in conflict with the liberal theological establishment of his day. His works included the Orthodox Lutheran conception of a God that unconditionally accepts man, faith itself being a gift from God, and that the highest moral position is reached when a person realizes this and, no longer depending on her or himself, on themselves, when a person, no longer depending on themselves, takes the leap of faith into the arms of a loving God. Kierkegaard describes the leap, quote-unquote, using the story of Adam and Eve, particularly Adam's qualitative leap, into sin. Sorry about that, by the way. Adam's leap signifies a change from one quality to another, the quality of possessing no sin to the quality of possessing sin. Kierkegaard writes that the transition from one quality to another can take place only by a leap, quote-unquote. When the transition happens, one moves directly from one state to the other, never possessing both qualities. Kierkegaard wrote, "In the moment man becomes conscious that he is born, for his antecedent state, to which he may not cling, was one of non-being." Oh no, I didn't even read that part. That's going to come up later. Kierkegaard felt that a leap of faith was vital in accepting Christianity due to the paradoxes that exist in Christianity. In his books Philosophical Fragments and Concluding Unscientific Postscript, Kierkegaard delves deeply into the paradoxes that Christianity presents. All right, we actually have another minute or so before I have to go to the break. So Kierkegaard is, a Christian philosopher. You don't have to understand the leap of faith in terms of Christianity. But the stuff about Adam and Eve I wanted to include because, of course, my name's Adam. So again, sorry about that whole falling into sin thing. Many people consider that a bad move, but we'll see. We'll see where, what this allows for us. Regardless, what Kierkegaard is talking about in terms of bringing the self-reflection of thinking to an end and then starting to do things is, related to an idea of we sit around and think forever, but what are we doing, right? And, this is to make it very macabre, right? And I am in no way advocating that anyone, emulate this activity. But, Aaron Bushnell committed an act of suicide as protest. He set himself on fire, similar to, the Buddhist monks or whatnot who would set themselves on fire in Vietnam. And we actually had something similar happen in Atlanta. I believe the person who set themselves on fire on December 2nd or something like that. I think they didn't die, but it's also impossible to find their name. But regardless, we still have a little bit longer. But in a way, Bushnell is taking a leap of faith. He's like, I'm not going to sit here. And, as he said, his thinking was he wasn't going to be complicit with genocide. And, apparently, genocide is what, quote unquote, our ruling class, considers to be normal. So in relation to that, Bushnell thought that his action of setting himself on fire was not extreme. And so we're going to put that into conversation with, Afro-pessimist ideas about, what does it mean to join the dance of social death? What is social death? And also we're going to talk about Baudrillard's relationship to political engagement and death, both in biological terms, coming to the end of one's life, but also a sort of conceptual death, the idea of dying and being born again, or the idea of ego death, or engaging with radical indeterminacy and moving beyond all terms and conditions. And I'm going to be connecting this with the idea of unconditional love. So that's really where we're headed. It's not about really being consumed by flames, but thinking about the fire inside, thinking about the love which can burn in our hearts, and have something to say about our present moment. But with all that being said, we're going to tie together all these themes, but we're here on WRFG. We hawkin' merch.
Support WRFG by purchasing merchandise from our new online store. WRFG t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags, and more are available for sale at WRFG.org. Take this opportunity to adorn your beautiful self with merchandise from your favorite community radio station for progressive information and quality handpicked music. To purchase WRFG merchandise, please visit WRFG.org.
Yes, please do visit WRFG.org. Make sure and purchase copiously, if you so desire, from the wares, the merchandise, which WRFG Atlanta so graciously offers for us all to be able to wear its writing and its images on our bodies. And also, you are also able, by going to WRFG.org, to find through the schedule the page for Solution Space. And on that page, you will find a link to the Substack that I'm reading from right now. So you can follow along with the show, and there's also ways to engage with the larger project this show is a part of, which is called Experimental Unit. You can read about that again on the Experimental Unit Substack, no surprise there. So I'm just going to scroll through and deal with the different topics that I thought of for this week, just in the order that they're presented on here. I'm trying to do a better job of organizing the show. That remains a work in progress. Regardless, the next thing that I want to talk to you about is an influence operation. So when it comes to, maybe we'll pick up right where I left off in terms of Aaron Bushnell, right? So Aaron Bushnell set himself on fire and killed himself. Aaron Bushnell is no longer with us. At least, not in this plane or whatever. In some sense, now he's everywhere or something like that. But so, why did Aaron Bushnell do this? What is the point of this? Ultimately, the reason why people do things like set themselves on fire is that they are trying to have influence. There's something that you can read about. I didn't think to put this on the page, unfortunately. Maybe I'll update it later. But there's something called a costly signal. So this is basically the idea that, if I just tell you, I love you, it's like, okay, great. But if I impose a cost on myself, then that makes my signal more credible. So this has a lot to do with negotiating, even sort of communicating with people during warfare. How can you trust people, right? And so the idea that people impose a cost on themselves in order to send a signal shows like your dedication or your sincerity. So, it's all well and good for me to sit here and say Black Lives Matter and to say that, I'm opposed to, all bombing campaigns, especially, what's going on with Israel and Palestine and Hamas and everything. But Aaron Bushnell, he set himself on fire. So you can kind of tell, he put his life where his mouth was. In other words, he died on fire, or he didn't die in the video or anything, but, he's on fire in the process of dying, shouting, "Free Palestine," right? He doesn't even break when, he's on fire, right? So it's similar to, you can think of a Christian saint. I forget who it was, but, he was being cooked alive, right? He was just on a fire. And then he didn't lose his wherewithal, right? He didn't, go crazy and was just screaming. Maybe at a certain point he did. But there was a time while he was being cooked alive where he said to his torturers and killers, he said, "Okay, boys, this side's done. Turn me over." Like, so he's sitting there making jokes, right? And it's this ability to, not panic in the face of death, and the willingness to engage in this sort of sacrificial behavior, which is sort of related to a costly signal. But the point that I'm trying to overall say is that what's really trying to be done here is an influence operation. So the question is, how can we get through to the government? As Minister B, as Claire Elise Boucher, better known as her recording name Grimes, says in the song, "We appreciate power." One of the lyrics is, "When will the state agree to cooperate?" Right? And then, here at Experimental Unit, we are sophisticated enough, of course. We know there is no the state, right? There's just people, right, who are hiding behind or, projecting themselves onto, this fictive idea of the state. This sort of idea of a legal fiction or fictions is something that Yuval Harari mentions in one of the interviews that I linked on the page, which is about the struggle for the soul of the Jewish nation, or the Israeli nation. Where was I going with that? Basically, the point that I'm trying to say is that, overall what we want to do is have influence, because it's like, the CIA, these people, they have drones, they have nuclear weapons, their offices are compounds. I've demonstrated at the headquarters of FBI Atlanta. They have a gate, right? You can't go up to the building, right? There are security guards. There are, there's all kinds of stuff. There's surveillance cameras. There's, secure databases, the Utah Data Center, Area 51. There's all these heavily secure locations. And so how are you supposed to get through? But these sorts of physical barriers are really only a metaphor for what you might call, what I have called in, my essay, The Metonymy Economy, which you can find a link to, I don't know. It's not on this page yet. But anyway, I wrote an essay called The Metonymy Economy, where I talked about this idea called cognitive affective protectionism. So protectionism is when you put up tariffs or whatever, you stop people from importing goods into your country. So it's like, we make Chinese cars more expensive in America because if we just allowed people to ship Chinese cars here, it would have a very bad impact on the American economy because our cars are more expensive than China's. So we add an extra cost, right? So you have to add an extra tax. So this is protectionism. So you're helping to develop infant industries domestically by shielding yourself from outside things. But so when it comes to when it comes to cognitive affective protectionism, you can basically think about like, you're an artist, you're trying to develop your own artistic vision. And so to an extent, you're insulating yourself from other people's ideas, especially people's criticism, right? At a certain point, it is helpful to get feedback on your art. But if you're trying to do something different, and this relates, to Ben Zweibelson's ideas about how inside the military bureaucracy, there's a lot of discouragement of new ideas because we already know what to do, right? So this is, again, this sort of cognitive affective protectionism where it's like, it's hard to get into the Pentagon, but it's even harder to get into the mind of Mark Milley. It's harder to get into, to influence the strategic direction of Central Intelligence Agency. How do you change Julianne Galina's mind? So anyway, here, this next section, I'm talking about, influence operations. And so I have picked out some organizations and individuals that I think it is good for us to focus on sending messages to. And overall, of course, the message that we have is love, love. Right? So in a way, the message that we have, it can't be put into words, right? But it basically boils down to the fact that, so many of the things that we think we need to achieve in terms of goals are things that we want to achieve because we want to protect people we love. We want to do things, we want to, have fun. We want to enjoy what's happening, right? But when we become too attached to an idea of the law, too attached to an idea of the nation state, an idea of loyalty, an idea of rationality or whatever, we get these, fixated on these mental constructs and we get cognitive rigidity, or as I call it, cognitive affective rigidity. And so when I say cognitive affective, oftentimes we talk about cognitive science, right? Which basically means, the science of thinking and stuff like that. Affect is more about feeling. So what I'm trying to emphasize by saying cognitive affective is that when we become rigid, we become stubborn. It's not just about our ideas. It's also has to do with our patterns of feelings, our patterns of managing our emotions. So basically, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the NSA, the MSS in China, the FSB in Russia, Vladimir Putin, yada, yada, yada. These kind of people are, what am I trying to say? Self-medicating. They are managing, just as we all are. We're managing their emotional state. Managing what Calvin Warren, who's an Afro-pessimist scholar, might call ontological terror, right? You can also look into something called terror management theory, which is basically talking about how, we're one of the only animals that knows that we're going to die. And so we have to constantly forget that we're going to die, and we sort of project our terror of death onto other things. It's not that we're going to die. It's not that, we're afraid of an inherent aspect of existence itself. The problem, of course, as we all know, is China. The problem, as we all know, of course, is Russia. The problem, as we all know, of course, is Trump supporters. The problem, as we all know, of course, is wokist communism, obviously, right? But, the problem is that we can get so fixated on this idea of who's the enemy, that, that's going to destroy what we love, basically. And so one of the clearest examples of this, and I've recently connected with somebody who runs something called a Global Alignment Discord server. I forgot to put a link to that as well. But anyway, the core focus here is that an artificial intelligence arms race between, quote unquote, who's ever hiding behind, quote unquote, the USA, China, Russia, whoever is a world-class computer person, right? If we keep developing these AIs out of a sense of fear, out of a sense of the Hobbesian trap, which is basically that we think other people are going to hurt us, so then we're going to hurt them, so they can't hurt us, right? But then they're afraid that we're going to hurt them, so they're going to hurt, The point is, using this sort of artificial intelligence is going to kill us all, right? And so that's also one of my main messages to, Claire Elise Boucher, Minister B. Grimes, and her friends over there at Midjourney, and David S. Host, and whoever the heck, was sitting there doing the image jams about, cherubs with machine guns fighting Roman soldiers that are girls or whatever, and Grimes is sitting there talking about there's going to be a war, America and China are going to fight with drones in some depopulated area. And it's no, Claire, no, Miss Boucher, the real danger that we face is that AI will be used with drones to literally kill everyone, will be used with designer biological weapons to kill a specific subset of people. And what is especially then tragic about that is you can commit mass genocide. You can kill, let's say, all but 100 people, right? They get together, ooh, we're special. They kill everybody else in the whole world, and now there's only 100 people left. What do you think is going to happen next? They're going to start killing each other, because if you don't resolve the fundamental issue of distrust, of mutual distrust, this Hobbesian trap, this problem that, we're afraid that we're going to hurt each other. If you don't resolve that, it doesn't matter how many other people there are in the world, right? So you're not going to protect yourself. And as I say in one of my songs, you're never going to run away from the trouble, all right? You can't kill your way to security, because all you're demonstrating by doing that is your own lack of trustworthiness. And the thing is, we're already seeing that, right? There's a reason why people don't trust, quote unquote, governments. There's a reason why they don't trust, quote unquote, politicians, why nobody wants to see Joe Biden or Donald Trump ever again in their whole life, right? There's a reason why, nobody, I don't know, I mean, I'm being hyperbolic here, but there's a reason why, all countries around the world have a trust deficit. And that's because it is clear, they follow something like ends justify the means. Anyway, I went off on a little bit of a rant there. But so point of the story is, here are, the influence operation targets that I've chosen for this week. We have Google AI, got a link to their Twitter account. We got Eric Schmidt, also a link to his Twitter account. Eric Schmidt is a former head executive of Google, and he's also worked together with the United States on its artificial intelligence strategy. So, he's a good person to try and get through to about, the kinds of issues that I'm discussing. Then we have Alexander NG. I'm not sorry, I apologize. I should know how to say this person's last name. But I'm not even going to try, because I'm going to do it wrong for sure. But so this Andrew person is a well-known artificial intelligence developer who has also talked about, dangers related to what's called great power competition or conflict and AI. So then we also have OpenAI's Twitter account. And under this one, And under some of the posts here, I have some sample messages, some messages that I have sent recently, and they're things for you to think about in terms of crafting your own message. So the idea is that you can go to the Substack page and, you can think of your own people that you want to reach out to as well. But the point is that we can reach out to individuals who are related to the topics that are of concern to us, and we can just try and influence them, right? And so especially if we are able to coordinate that, then we'll be able to maybe get somewhere. Anyways, so we are halfway through the show here, so it's time for me to remind you that you are listening to Solution Space here on WRFG Atlanta. Don't forget, you can go to WRFG.org and stream the show there. You are able to support the station, and, where else would I be able to say this on the radio? So please do show your support. If you are grateful for this broadcast, please help support WRFG in the continuance of its operations. Also, if you go to WRFG.org, you are able there to find the Solution Space page. It's just WRFG.org/solution-space. You can also find that by navigating through the lovely programming schedule of WRFG going to Thursday at noon. And you will find there a link to the Substack that I'm currently reading from, the Experimental Unit Substack. With all that being said, I'm also going to remind you that this is a call-in program. Last week and this week, the cat's got y'all's tongues, but I really do encourage you to pick up that phone and dial. Here, the telephone number is 404-523-8989. Again, that telephone number is 404-523-8989. Do you have a message for our tech AI overlords? Do you have a message for the artists of our day? Do you have a message for me? Do you have a message for anyone in particular? Please dial us up and let me know what you have to say. Some of the other people that I have here, this is now transitioning back to influence operations. So part of what I want to say about Bushnell, and I'll be saying a little bit more about that later, but fundamentally, it's not about setting yourself on fire. It's not about, we have to die or something like this. The point is, we really need to be put everything at stake. And fundamentally, what's actually more important than putting our life on the line, it's not necessarily. There's every day we're risking death, right? You cross the street, you're risking death, right? There's really no way around that. So I think a lot of this whole thing of like, oh no, it's not worth dying, that kind of thing, has a lot to do with how we try to separate out life from death, and like we're going to protect ourselves from death by not courting it. But spoiler alert, death doesn't care whether you're looking for it or not. Death will find you. Don't even worry about that part. Anyway, the point that I'm trying to say is that what's maybe even more important is to put our concepts at stake, to be willing to move on from our sacred cows, as Ben Zweibelson says in one of his podcast appearances, which is also not linked on here, but he says we should be knee deep in sacred cow blood. And this is even itself a little bit too violent of an imagery for me, but the sacred cow is not real, right? That's not a real sacred cow, is it? Shout out Stephen Colbert on the Bill O'Reilly Show. But anyway, it's not about really killing anything. It's about being able to let go of concepts and being, as they say in Andrew Kaplan opens up, or he at least references this concept in his essay toward a apocalyptic ontology of black messianism, something like this. He talks about the wholly black other. So it's in some sense to be open to the fact that other people are huge mysteries, and we try to put all kinds of labels on the world and on people in order to reduce complexity and to reduce uncertainty and to try to placate ourselves and build up this, fake idea that we have a stable identity, that, we know who we are, and all these kinds of things. It's not that there's anything wrong with us, but it's just that in order to really love ourselves, we have to embrace the mystery of ourselves. We have to embrace ineffability, which is to say, you can't put things into words. And so this also ties into, the idea of artificial intelligence, because when we're programming, here we are, the artificial intelligence, if you give it a specific goal, then it's going to destroy everything in the pursuit of that goal. That's called sort of the paperclip problem. So you tell something which is infinitely powerful, you're like, hey, you should make some paperclips. And then before you know it, the whole planet is being destroyed to make more paperclips, right? But that's what happens every time we articulate a specific goal. And so this has a lot to do with, people talking about in Buddhism or in Hinduism or, in Christianity, for that matter. The idea of, acting without an idea of a reward. So not acting with a goal, not goal-oriented activity. And in a Christian idea of love, not acting with an idea that you're going to get something back, because you are going to get something back. Don't worry about it. It's going to come back around. But the thing is that if we shouldn't necessarily place specific expectations on what that will be, because if we try to control what's going to happen, we're going to set processes into motion that are going to kill us. They're going to kill us all. They're going to wind up controlling us, enslaving us. And so that's what's going on with artificial intelligence. And that's why I think it's so important to connect together this theme of artificial intelligence with military theory and Ben Zweibelson, as well as Afro-pessimism and social death, as well as Baudrillard. So again, I have some sample messages, but feel free to engage also with the different things I've posted here when you're crafting your messages to these various people. So other people here, we have Bo Dai. Bo Dai is an assistant professor at Georgia Tech and also a research scientist at Google DeepMind. So I chose Bo Dai because I've already done protests or demonstrations because it's not really a protest, because it's not really that anybody's doing anything wrong. We just need to accelerate our process of learning so that we can, move past the sort of weaponization phase and get more to the point where our development of technology is helping us to facilitate love and to facilitate care for one another and end so many different kinds of suffering, as opposed to perpetuating them by, not being able to let go of our concepts the same way, the idea of having your hand stuck in a jar because you can't let go of what's inside. Anyway, so Bo Dai apparently probably works at the Google headquarters, which is in Atlanta, or not the headquarters, but the Google offices in Atlanta. So that's somebody on the inside. It's kind of hard to figure out who else works there, but I was able to figure out Bo Dai. I've got a link to his Twitter. I've got the Central Intelligence Agency. #CIA has a LinkedIn page. You can just send the CIA a message and put it under service request, right? Let them know, if you feel so inclined, it is possible for us to, request services of the CIA. This is funny because one time I went to Central Intelligence Agency headquarters in McLean, Virginia, and dropped off a copy, or I tried to drop off a couple copies of my aforementioned essay, The Metonymy Economy. I was like, it's really important that the CIA should read this. It doesn't even have complete citations, by the way. But anyway, then the CIA campus police came out and made me take back my paper and everything like that. But, I made sure I had a website at that time, and I made sure, to feature the PDF of that. So I figure somebody read it. Anyway, here's the message that I sent to Central Intelligence Agency yesterday on LinkedIn. All right. I say, please spread the message of loving love. Note the project outlined here. And I link to one of the articles that I've posted to Substack called I Just Lost the Game and So Did All of XU. So I just lost the game and so did all of you. Sorry about that. I continue on to the CIA and say, together we can end the threats posed by war and fulfill our personal and collective promises. Thank you for all you've done and all you will do. So this is part of my message, is that, similar to Jesus saying, I didn't come to overthrow the law, but to fulfill the law. So when I talk about how we need to let go of our concepts, right? You need to let go of the idea of loyalty to the United States of America, the idea of loyalty to the Constitution, the idea of loyalty to, your identity. Uh-oh, are you not going to be a real man? Uh-oh, it's like the idea is that all these concepts that we have, all these things that we think we have to live up to, right? These are supposed to be means to an end. And what is the end? The end is facilitating love. Why do we want to be a good American? Why do we want to follow the Constitution? Why do we want to be a good man? Why do we want to, whatever? Why do we want to pursue social justice or whatever sort of particular ideas we might have? Why do we want to do them? We want to do them to be able to get to situations where the people that we care about are okay, where we're able to enjoy each other's good company, right? We want to be good company, so we want to be able to converse with people, and we want to hang out with people who are fun to hang out with, who aren't, just so stubborn and, always whatever. So if we don't want to be around people like that or whatever, then we shouldn't be that way either. And so we need to realize that, if I'm telling the CIA, right, we need to love. We need to love more than we love the Central Intelligence Agency, more than we love information hegemony, more than we love the United States of America. Because what is the point of the United States of America? What's the point of a country? The point of a country is to like be able to protect a certain group of people. And now we're getting to a place where you can't protect a certain group of people. You can protect everybody, or you can protect nobody. And so that's where we're headed to. And so it's not about betrayal. It's not about being disloyal. It's about realizing that in order to be loyal to, God, in order to be loyal to nation, in order to be loyal to self, or, our people, however that's defined, we're going to have to expand the horizons of our thinking so that, we are able to, avoid the Hobbesian trap, avoid the sort of the competition and the mutual destruction, which is going to come from trying to keep our hand in that cookie jar, and make sure we get our peanuts, right? It's like, that's how you lose a hand, hashtag Luke Skywalker. Anyway, gonna run through some other ones. I already mentioned Julianne Galina. Julianne Galina is the new Deputy Director of Digital Innovation at Central Intelligence Agency. She's got a LinkedIn. You can't message her that easily, but you can repost you can leave a comment on her posts, and you can also repost her posts and add a comment of your own. I also added Minister B, aka Grimes, aka Claire Elise Boucher's Twitter account. My main message for Ms. Boucher right now is that she's too wrapped up in humanism. Ms. Boucher calls herself a human supremacist, which is like, a pretty disgusting thing to say, I think. I think even just starting with the category of all sentient beings is much better from Buddhism. But also, there's criticisms of the idea of human that are taken together in Baudrillard, that are in Afro-pessimism, and that are even in this song called Caribou, which was originally by this band called the Pixies, but the definitive version of Caribou was done by Tanya Tagaq. And one of the lines in that song is, this human form where I was born, I now repent. And so this idea of the human, we need to protect humanity. This is another one of these concepts, like the United States of America, which is in a gots-to-go situation. And this is what needs to be communicated to Minister Boucher. Then we have Director Zweibelson, Ben Zweibelson. I've got a link to his Twitter account on there. And the message to Ben Zweibelson is that, it's so important for us to move past the war framing. It's not about dealing with the challenge of warfare. The important thing is to shift into an idea of emergency, where it's no longer me versus you. It's not the United States versus China. It's you and me versus the problem, right? Like any good marriage. And so any good, friendship, whatever. So if we're going to try and cultivate spiritual friendship among all people, it's got to be you and me versus the problem. So what's the problem, right? And so Ben Zweibelson has a concept called phantasmal war. I just port that over into phantasmal emergency, which is exactly what I'm talking about in terms of there's the emergency that we're all so attached to different things, ideas, right? That we can't let go of our ideas. And even Harari talks about this in his video about the struggle over the soul of the Israeli nation. He's talking about how people have different stories. We put fictions, we create stories in our minds that mediate between us and the world. And we can value those stories more than we value our life. Look at Aaron Bushnell, right? Look at everybody who's killing and dying, for the sake of insistence on their ideas in the world today. So anyway, so for Director Zweibelson, Ben Zweibelson, the war frame is one of the things that we have to sacrifice. In order to be a soldier, in order to be a guardian adequate to our times, it is necessary to move past the idea of warfare. Similar to Minister B, to Grimes, to Claire Elise Boucher. Spoiler alert, Earth to Minister B, right? Humanism is not the way, right? So I would like to see, the immediate cessation of this, this idea of like, oh no, we need to like band together all humanity. So we're finally going to be able to get to maybe some Afro-pessimist ideas on why that is so problematic. But I also put a link to Bob Dylan's Twitter account and Yuval Harari's Twitter account. Bob Dylan, because he's just one of our best artists right now. If Bob Dylan could have some of the messages I'm conveying here communicated to him, I think he could be a very powerful creative force in, inspiring a lot of people. And Yuval Harari is an Israeli academic and historian who talks a lot about, he's spoken a lot about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially since October 7th. And, a couple videos of his are also linked in addition to a couple articles about Jewish theology. I have a couple articles here about the concept of God in Judaism, as well as this concept called Shema, which refers to the unity of God. It's part of a prayer which is repeated by very devout Jewish people each day, talking about the unity of God. So I'm inspired by Harari talking about the struggle of the soul over the soul of the Israeli nation. I think that should lead all of us to see that what's important is let's get into the question of Jewish theology, right? Let's get on the inside of that problem and not just say like, oh, well, there's Orthodox Jewish supremacists within Israel who want to do ethnic cleansing and get rid of the Arabs and the Palestinians and everything. It's like, okay, very well, but let's of course not blame this on Judaism. Let's basically make this our own concern. Let's look into this question of Jewish theology. I've already mentioned on this program in weeks past the idea of tikkun, which is the idea of reparation, or sorry, that's a word, but what I mean is, things being repaired in the world, the shards of God coming together. And so if the Jewish people, according to their own theology, are supposed to play, a crucial role in the mending of the world and in, the reconciliation of the Creator and its creation, whatever that might mean, well, let's get on with it, right? It doesn't seem like, but I mean, this is a challenge for all of us, right? I mean, so let's